Hi, I'm Esther, and in this video, I'm going to sew up the Nielsen Hovea jacket. I'll show you step by step how you can sew this pattern up for yourself. There are so many variations to this jacket slash coat pattern, so you can really customize it any which way you would like. The Hovea jacket is a loose fit, dropped shoulder jacket or coat pattern. It comes in multiple lengths for you to choose from, as well as these featured angled pockets on the front. This is the jacket here, and you'll see that it comes with 6 standard variations. You can fully line it or have it unlined. You can have a quilted version, and there are multiple closures that you can choose from, such as a belt or ties, and also an optional hang loop you can pop in the back. In this video, I will be sewing up View E, which is this one here. It's the cropped jacket with mini pockets, the collar band, and an optional lining. So in this video, I will be showing you how to sew up the jacket with no lining, and I will be finishing off the seams of my jacket using binding. So I'll show you how to do that as well. This is the jacket that I've sewn up here. There are so many different fabrics you can choose from. So have a look at the hashtag MNHovea if you're looking for any inspiration to help you make decisions around what style you'd like to sew up. We do have a couple of other videos featuring the fully lined version and also a quilted version. So you can find those videos on the Nielsen YouTube channel as well if you're looking for a sew along for those options. Otherwise, let's get started with this View E unlined jacket variation.
We're going to begin with the pockets. I will be sewing unlined pockets in this tutorial. You can choose to do lined pockets even if the rest of your jacket is unlined, so it's up to your personal preference. Attach lightweight fusible interfacing to the wrong side of your pocket facings. Fold in 1 centimeter along the convex facing edge. This edge should not have a notch, and press it in. Now align your pocket facing with your pockets along that top edge. That's going to be our pocket opening. So we're going to sew 1.5 centimeters from that raw edge, aligning the notches along the way. Press the pocket facing and the seams away from the pocket. Now we're going to understitch next to that seam along the pocket facing side, less than 2 mils from that seam. Now we can turn the facing to the wrong side of the pocket, and we're going to make sure that that 1 centimeter that we previously pressed in is nice and neatly tucked underneath so that that raw edge is enclosed. Then you can press it so that we can top stitch or hand sew along that facing edge to attach it to the pocket. Our pockets are now ready to be attached to our front pieces. Place your front pieces right side facing up, and then the bottom edge of the jacket should align with the bottom edge of your pocket piece, and the top edge of your pocket piece should align with the relevant notch from your pattern. Pin them in place, and then we're going to stay stitch by sewing just under 1.5 centimeters along the side seam, pivoting and sewing just under 6 centimeters from the hemline, pivoting again and sewing 1.5 centimeters up the center front. Here I'm just using pins to mark approximately where 6 centimeters to help guide me as I sew. I'm going to add an optional pocket division on my jacket that fits my phone. You can do this for any objects, not just your phone, such as keys or sewing tools that might come in handy. So simply measure your object and then add 3 centimeters to that. Measure this distance from the center front. I've marked my measurements with pins here, and then simply top stitch all the way from the hem up to the top of the pocket opening, parallel to the center front edge. You can add as many divisions as you would like to your jacket. Next, we're going to line up our front pieces and our back right sides together along the shoulder seams. Sew the shoulder seams 1.5 centimeters from the raw edge. Finish the raw edges by your desired method. I'm going to be using bias binding, so I'm going to show you how to attach that now. We have a separate video that can walk you through making your own bias binding and attaching it in more depth, so we'll link that below. Place the right side of your bias binding face down onto the edge that you're going to bind. We're then going to sew 1 centimeter from that raw edge. You can then trim off any excess binding. Press the binding and the seam allowance away from the garment. Fold the raw edge of the bias binding up once to enclose the raw edges, and then fold it a second time to enclose all of the seam allowance. The binding edge should extend slightly beyond the original stitching line. Press and pin everything in place, and then you can either stitch in the ditch or top stitch to enclose that raw edge. You can also hand sew the binding close if you prefer. This is the same binding technique that I'm going to use to finish all of the raw seams as I'm sewing this unlined jacket. Now we can attach the sleeve. Open the garment so the right side is facing up and the sleeve opening is nice and flat. Now we can pop the sleeve right sides together so that the sleeve head notch is aligned with the shoulder seam. Line up all the edges of the sleeve with the edges of the sleeve opening and pin it in place. Now we can sew the arm size seam 1.5 centimeters from that raw edge. Press the sleeve and the seams away from the garment, and then again finish the raw edge by your desired method. I'm going to be binding mine again. Once you've finished that raw edge, we can fold the garment the right sides together so that the sleeve seam and the side seams should be aligned. Make sure that the arm size seam is aligned, that's the part at the underarm. Now we can sew the side seam and the sleeve seam in a continuous line 1.5 centimeters from that raw edge. Once sewn, you might find that clipping into the underarm seam around this area will help with the movement and how your jacket sits. However, since I'm going to be finishing my side seam with binding, I'm not going to clip into it. Finish the raw edges by your desired method, and then we're going to move on to the hem. I'll start with the sleeve hem, turning it in 1 centimeter to the wrong side, all around the sleeve hem and pressing it nice and flat. And then I'll turn it in another 5 centimeters to the wrong side and press. I'm adding pins to keep everything in place because we're now going to top stitch from the right side of the garment, making sure that we catch that hem on the underside. We're going to sew just under 5 centimeters from that edge all around the sleeve hems. It should look like this when it's finished. Do the same for the jacket hem, turning it up 1 centimeter to the wrong side, and then another 5 centimeters once more and pressing it down. I've used lots of pins to keep everything in place. Note that if you have pockets, you'll be folding 2 layers of fabric together. If you have quite bulky fabric, you may want to trim away some of it to reduce the bulk around the hem. So we're now going to top stitch just under 5 centimeters from the hemline. Note that if you're sewing a cropped Hovea jacket that is view E or F, you'll lose some pocket depth if you top stitch your hem. Hand sewing the hem from the inside of the jacket will help to preserve that pocket depth instead. Before we attach our collar band, we're going to stay stitch 1.5 centimeters from that raw edge all around the entire neckline. We're going to clip into the seam allowance around the back neckline. Careful not to cut through your stitches, but this will help to ease our collar band in. To get our collar band prepped, attach lightweight fusible interfacing to the wrong side of your collar band pieces. Then place the 2 collar band pieces right sides together and sew along the short edge. That should be the centre back seam 1.5 centimeters from the raw edge. Press the seams open. And then we're going to fold the collar band in half and press it to crease. Then we're going to open it back up and turn one of the edges in 1.5 centimeters to the wrong side, all along that edge, and press. If you would like to add the optional ties or the hang loop to your jacket, now's the time to do that. Then to attach the collar, we're going to place it right sides together with our jacket. The unpressed raw edge of the collar band should be aligned with the neckline. The short end of the collar band should extend past the bottom of your jacket by 1.5 centimeters, and we're going to sew all around it 1.5 centimeters from that raw edge. Make sure that you use the notches on your collar band to line up with the relevant seams and notches on your jacket. Once you've sewn the collar to the jacket, we can press the collar and the seams away from the garment. Now with our jacket the right side out, we're going to fold the collar in half with the right sides together, matching up the folded edge that we previously pressed in with the seam that we just sewed. Here at the hem, the short edges of the collar should line up nicely, and we can sew along that bottom edge 1.5 centimeters. Be careful not to catch the rest of your garment hem as you're stitching that seam. Now we can clip into the corner and trim back some of the seam allowance to reduce the bulk so that we can turn the collar the right way round and use a pointing tool to make sure that that corner is nice and square. On the inside of our jacket, we should be able to see that all of our seam allowance gets hidden inside the collar band. So all of those raw edges are going to be enclosed. Use lots of pins to hold everything in place, as we're now going to either top stitch onto our collar piece right near that seam, or you can stitch in the ditch. If you are stitching in the ditch, you'll be stitching right where I've popped that blue pin. If you're choosing to top stitch onto your collar piece, you'll be stitching where I've popped this white pin. And with both of these options, as we're sewing from the right side of our jacket, we will need to ensure that we catch the underside of our collar on the inside of our jacket as we're sewing. You can also choose to finish your jacket by hand from the inside if you would prefer that. We're going to sew all around the entire neckline to enclose that collar and finish off the jacket. I chose to stitch in the ditch, so I sewed nice and slowly, checking on the underside that I was catching the other side of the collar as I went, and I was happy with how that turned out in the end. I did have to go really slowly because it is hard to catch that underside and get it nice and neat, but that is the last step for our Hovea View E unlined jacket. This is how it turned out in the end. I think it looks super cute, and I will probably make more Hovea jackets in future.
So I hope that this video was helpful for you. There are so many different variations that you can make up in this Hovea pattern. It is such a versatile pattern. I've made a handful of them now, ranging from a quilted version through to this lightweight pattern, through to a more coat style. So really the options are endless. If you do end up sewing a Hovea coat or jacket, we would love to see how it turned out. Use the hashtag MNHovea so that other sewers can find your makes as well. As I mentioned in the intro, there are a few other Hovea videos where we've sewn up different variations. So again, if you're looking for that inspiration, you can find that on the Megan Nielsen YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in another video soon. Bye.